Roy. What is important to you now that wasn't important to you, or what is unimportant to you now that was important? Mrs. Worth. Well, I can tell you some of the things that are important. I see lots of parents and children, teenagers, and I have the greatest affection for young people, the greatest admiration and respect for their integrity, their virtues, their courage, and their generosity. But I feel that grown-ups are so wrapped up in the importance of material living that they get out of touch, you see. And if they'd stop and think, perhaps I may be dead next week, so it really doesn't matter if that poor boy passes his exams or not, or whether he gets a good job or not. But it is so important that he should know I, his father, love him and respect him and think he's the most wonderful boy in all the world. And if only parents would say it to their children, I respect you, I'm proud of you, I love you. I think for the first 10 months of the war, that children would earn their respect. I'm a terrible coward, and during the war, during air raids, my teeth used to chatter, and I think for the first 10 months of the war, I never slept for more than 2 hours at a time in sheer terror. And I woke up one night, the coward in his heart dies many deaths, and if you face the worst possible thing that can happen to you if you're afraid of something, if you run away, that fear will master you. But if you turn around and look at it, go up to it and look at it, either it will change its nature, or you will find it is some merciful, purposeful lesson of God. And I don't think any of us nowadays make enough allowance for God in our everyday life. Lots of times when you go to church on a Wednesday or a Thursday and you say, God, if you want me to feed any more people this week, you'll either have to send me the food or the money. And believe me, it never fails. Roy. Now, whenever I think that or act on that, I always feel it's being rather naive and almost superstitious. I'm not saying I don't do it. I do it, but I feel vaguely ashamed of myself for being so naive and superstitious. Mrs. Worth. Well, if you've done everything you could do yourself, I think it's silly not to leave the rest to God. And I think, too, that one should leave it to God before you're absolutely at the end of your tether. You're a father. You wouldn't like it if your son pushed himself to the point of death before he came down and said to you, please help me. Why do you do that to God? Roy. Why don't you expect a miracle? Why have you resigned yourself to the fact that you're going to die? Why don't you say to God, God, work a miracle, get me better? Mrs. Worth. I say to God every day, I say, God, I'm going to die when you want me to die, not when the doctors tell me I'm going to. To me, a miracle is the suspension of the laws of nature, as we know them now. To a lot of my non-Catholic friends, it's answer to prayer. Lots of other rather vague and woolly things which I don't really quite understand, but why should God work a miracle for me? Roy. But why shouldn't he? Mrs. Worth. Well, if he wants to, he will. And if he doesn't, you won't feel hurt or feel that he has been unkind to you? Mrs. Worth. No. Roy. I think I know what you mean, because with one's own little children, they sometimes ask for something, and you can understand them wanting the thing they ask for, but you also know either it is impossible, or else you know it's not good for them. Mrs. Worth. I can see that it could very easily be very bad for my children if they had me round their necks for the next 50 years. Roy. I'm sure that's not why God is calling you to heaven. I'm sure that's not the reason. But anyway, that's a lovely thing to say. Have you ever had any faint feeling of the injustice of all this? Now, one does come across what you might call, tragic deaths. You know, the young, good, God-fearing, praying, Jesus-loving young mom who's taken or dies, and then the disillusioned, uncaring person who's wrecked lives all over the place goes on living till they're 90. This does seem a bit odd and unjust, doesn't it? Mrs. Worth. I'm sorry, you're talking a lot of poppycock. This injustice rubbish? Who are we to say what is just and what is not just? God is love. God is truth. God is justice. And as for the sinner and all that, well, our Lord tells us a parable about the laborers in the vineyard and those who slipped in at the last moment, and St. Augustine, inter pontem et fontem misericordia Domini. Roy. What does that mean in English? Mrs. Worth. Well, between the bridge and the water, when the bad old chap fell over, the mercy of God got him in the very last breath. I don't know anything about justice. I don't really want to. I just want love and mercy. And some people take longer to work out their salvation than others. You see, you fight God when you're young. You fight God, you wrestle with him till you're black and blue, and then one day he just says one word in your ear. Nothing's the same again. The whole meaning of life is changed, isn't it? I think you know the great psychologists like Jung. They say in your younger years, you're coming to terms with the exterior reality, and in your middle years, you withdraw. You make this withdrawal and return, and then come to the peak of their lives in their middle years, and then decline into the grave. But you see, as a Christian, you've seen the glimmer over the horizon, which gives completely different meaning to the whole of life.